Thanks very much, Vonnie. We continue now our conversation about Saudi Arabia cutting ties with Iran. The clash between these two major oil producers is sending prices up a bit. The oil prices are going up. We'll see how long that lasts. Former U.S. Ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Robert Jordan, joins us now via Skype in Dallas. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Ambassador. And Bloomberg News reporter Kambiz Farouhar is here as well. Kambiz, let's start with you. I now see that UAE has downgraded its diplomatic relations with Iran. Bahrain has joined Saudi Arabia, severing its ties. What is going on right now over in the Gulf? What are the developments?
I think we're seeing the division between Saudi Arabia and Iran play out amongst regional countries. As we saw, the Saudis have cut relations. Bahrain joined them. UAE downgraded. There are reports that maybe Sudan may be joining the Saudi team. It's also a grouping of Sunnis versus Shiites on one level. We're waiting to see whether Iraq and other countries, how they behave. It's sort of a power play on how there's this proxy wars that we're seeing in Syria, in Yemen, play out now in diplomatic front.
So the ball is in Iran's court at the moment. I mean, Saudi Arabia has severed the ties. So what's Iran's next move?
I think Iran has to find a way to reach a relationship, reach out to Saudi Arabia, try to bring back this diplomatic crisis to a situation where they can manage it. I think the developments have caught the Iranians by surprise, how fast things are moving. And the Iranian, under Rouhani, this is the last thing he wants right now, because he wants the country to focus on the implementation day, on the nuclear deal, on investments going to Iran. And this happening is going to scare off investors.
Getting the sanctions lifted.
Exactly.
Kambiz, we sit here, you said it, two proxy wars, Yemen, Syria. An escalation, yes, a surprise, probably not. The big question that's not been asked all morning, the United States, the government, on the one side they've got their ally, Saudi Arabia, on the other side they've got a nuclear deal with Iran. What on earth do they do about this escalation?
Well, there are two escalations. One was escalation in Iran. They didn't expect the demonstrators to come out and actually attack the Saudi Arabian embassy. That caught Rouhani's team by surprise. So they couldn't actually condemn their own protesters, but they had to sort of self-pedal the attacks on Saudi Arabia. That has put them at odds with the regional countries. They want to show themselves to be a responsible country that can be open to the world. This is Rouhani's message. We are the new Iran, not Ahmadinejad. And what the U.S. can, the U.S. is caught in a bind. They need both Iran and Saudi Arabia to resolve Syria and Yemen. So they need them to make up without actually going to further, escalating this any further.
Ambassador, you served in Saudi Arabia after 9/11, clearly a time of great tension. Compare that to the tensions we're seeing now, because it's geopolitical risks that have investors so concerned.
Well, I think the tension after 9/11 was probably greater if you look at it over the long scheme of things. But I will say that the temperature right now is rising. I'm not sure we have seen the end of escalation of tensions here. And so I do think the markets are justifiably concerned. This is a situation that also reflects a tremendous challenge to the Saudi leadership. The price of oil is down. Their budget has gone haywire. Next year's budget shows a lot of belt tightening, which will not be received well by their population. So they're trying to come in with a strong hand. They're trying to show their own population that even peaceful dissent will not be tolerated. A lot of this has to do with Saudi domestic concerns as much as it does concerns about Iran, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Ambassador, that's exactly what I want to ask about. And that is, why did Saudi Arabia execute this fairly prominent Shiite cleric? I mean, was this just a blunder? They must have anticipated there'd be some reaction. Or does this actually indicate something deeper about the insecurity of the Saudi regime and the real concern, particularly about the eastern provinces?
I think it does reflect something deeper. Bear in mind that the Saudis look back to the fall of the Shah of Iran in 1979 as something they never wanted to repeat within Saudi Arabia. And so they wrap themselves in the legitimacy of the religious establishment. People back in '79 viewed the Ayatollah Khomeini as a peaceful protester to start with. Likewise, al-Nimr here in the eastern province was also viewed as a peaceful protester at the time being, but I think the Saudis viewed him as just about as dangerous as the Ayatollah Khomeini was in Iran. They are paranoid about dissent right now, and frankly, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean someone's not out to get you. So I think that they view this as an existential threat. A number of these other terrorists, by the way, were probably bona fide terrorists. A number of them were accused of the terrorist activity assaulting the U.S. consulate in Jeddah in 2004. I remember that very well. My own driver was killed in that attack. So there are a number of these who had been languishing on death row for some time. King Abdullah had been hesitant to pull the trigger, and now King Salman, I think, is trying to show that he's a strong leader, despite a lot of internal dissent within the royal family and within his population. And this is part of what explains what's happened here.
Mr. Ambassador, Matt Miller here. I have on the Bloomberg terminal a lot of information. OPEC Go brings up a chart that shows us that 31% of the oil out of OPEC is produced by Saudi Arabia. Nobody else really even puts up double digits here. I mean, Iran is only putting up 8% of OPEC's oil. If the price of oil actually starts to come up again, does this relieve some of the tensions? Because I think most of the tensions, or a lot of the tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia haven't been on Sunni Shiite lines lately, but rather because of the oil price and the fact that the Saudis continue to pump when the Iranians need money.
It's certainly state rivalry to a great degree as well. So I think they're both very important. But yes, I think if the price edges up somewhat, it relieves some of the pressure on Saudi Arabia, pressure on their budget. They can then use some of those funds to continue to subsidize their population. But that's not a long-term sustainable strategy in any event.
Well, we got to take a dig in, though. When we think about OPEC, when we think about the broader implications, Saudi Arabia, their economy is 80% dependent on oil. How can you lead your country? Earlier when you were saying, well, leadership needs to show a strong hand, how do you begin to have a strong hand when you're in this kind of position?
Well, they started it some years ago by emphasizing education in areas other than strictly the oil economy. They now have 80,000 students studying in the United States and probably another 100,000 studying elsewhere. They are slowly realizing they've got to come into the 21st century with a more diversified economy.
But hold on, those 80,000 students who are studying in the United States don't want to come home. There aren't jobs in Saudi Arabia for them to come home to.
Well, they're required to come home for at least 2 years. I think most of them do. They have strong family ties. But yes, a lot of them will ultimately migrate back. So it's a risk that the Saudis are taking. But they're desperate to find a way to create a population that has job skills beyond simply an oil economy. There is a lot of foreign direct investment going on now. It's improved since the Saudis joined the WTO. And I think we will see some progress in that regard, but it may be too little too late.
The former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, Robert Jordan, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Matt Miller, your point about the tension between Iran and Saudi Arabia and the oil market, if there was any faint hope that those two countries could come to an agreement within OPEC to cut Saudi production to allow Iran to lift their own, forget about it. And that's the bottom line this morning for the oil market.
Absolutely. And to that point, let's take a look at the oil markets and the futures markets. Just quickly, before we go to break here, you can see we're down 310 points on the Dow Jones E-mini contracts. Oil has been gaining a little bit this morning, but surprisingly not as much as you would expect with these kind of geopolitical tensions. Just about 1% now at $37.42 a barrel. Take a look quickly at the big oil stocks, because if oil does put up some big moves, this is what drives the market. Exxon, Chevron, and Schlumberger.
Thank you very much.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.